We are excited to keep growing, especially as the world shifts away from, I think, ghost kitchens as a thing. There is a lot of opportunity for people like us to expand. Every region needs something like this. Every region needs a place where food entrepreneurs can make stuff that is fresh. And, when you're doing stuff without preservatives, it really helps to be regional. So you're not shipping things halfway across the world. And so all the major population centers need something like this. And the demand has been really strong. And we've seen so many communities around the country, places like San Francisco, New York, Seattle, just really exciting CPG communities. We're excited to start bringing our product to places like this. And a lot of them have some kind of commercial kitchens already, but they usually don't have something like us that's targeting scaling companies. And so we're just excited to get out there and meet more people in this business.
Hello, CPGers. Welcome back to the Startup CPG Podcast. With me, your host, Daniel Scharff. I'm the founder of Startup CPG and host of the podcast here. We've got another great operations-themed episode for you here today, but I promise it's entry level. I'm diving in with Mott Smith from our partner, Amped Kitchens, for a 101 on what is a commercial kitchen? How do they differ from co-mans? How do you get started? How do they work as you scale? Who might it be a good fit for? How much does it cost? All the good stuff. After the episode, if you want to follow up with Mott or the Amped team, you could give them a call. Their number is 872-240-8731. You can hit up Mott Smith on our Slack channel. He's around operations a lot, or on LinkedIn. Or you could email them. Amped Kitchens is AMPED Kitchens. And their email is leasing@ampedkitchens.com. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Today's guest is Mott Smith, one of our Startup CPG partners, the co-founder of Amped Kitchens, which owns and operates CPG-focused commercial kitchen buildings in LA and Chicago, with more on the way. I recently got to tour one of the LA buildings. It was so cool to see how a brand could start there, from getting your product ready to going through manufacturing and starting to scale. And you have pallet deliveries going in and out. I was so interested to learn how working in a commercial kitchen can be a really good option for some brands, as opposed to diving right in with a co-man, where you might have a quicker route to scale up, but a lot less control and flexibility over manufacturing, which can be really critical in the early days when you're hyper-focused on getting your product to where it needs to be, and then also being able to flex as those early new orders start coming in. Mott, welcome to the podcast. What got you into this crazy world of commercial kitchens?
Oh, man. Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Daniel. We're huge fans of Startup CPG and the whole crew. What you've built is awesome. What got us into this crazy business is my business partner, Brian and Albert, and I are really into cities. We're into small businesses. We're into food. And during the time right after the Great Recession, so many of our friends were starting small food businesses, CPG and otherwise, and all of them were having the same problem, which is they had like some amount of money saved up and they were ready to go, and they were getting totally swallowed up by red tape and bureaucracy. And they were blowing their life savings on like building permits and HACCP plans and things like this that were not their core business of creating a great product and marketing it and getting it out to the world. And so we thought, because our background is in real estate development, and particularly building highly regulated buildings in really complex environments, which totally describes food, we thought that we might have something to contribute. If we kind of took on the part of building a building that satisfied, say, 90% of the things inspectors care about when they're looking at a small food business, a CPG business, then we could rent out spaces to companies who could then spend their resources again on the things that make them great, which are their product and their marketing.
So I think it's really interesting that you came at it from an alternative of, hey, maybe don't build your own facility and have to get all this other stuff. Whereas the way I naturally think about it is like, hey, maybe don't jump right in with a co-man and consider doing it yourself this way. So I guess, both can be true. I wonder what the breakdown is of, why people choose you or what their alternative would be.
Yeah, it's funny. Our sweet spot, and I think the sweet spot for any commercial kitchen, any company that's in a commercial kitchen, is probably somewhere between, call it, a couple $100,000 a year of revenue or pre-revenue, all the way up to say $5 million, sometimes more. I mean, we've got clients who are in the 60, $70 million a year range, but the real sweet spot is about, call it, 250-ish up to about 5 million. And the reason for that is that famously, if you're trying to get a co-manufacturer and you're not at the $5 million a year rate yet, the co-mans that are willing to work with you might not be the cream of the crop. I mean, there's some really great ones who are small, who work with small companies, but even with the good ones at that level, uh, being getting time on their lines, getting their attention, getting calls back can really be a hassle. And if you just got a purchase order from an Erewhon or a Whole Foods and you've got to produce 10,000 units in 2 months or whatever it is, you really don't want to be scrambling trying to find somebody who you trust with your baby. The
Hmm.
people who come to us, we like to joke that control freaks are totally welcome at Amped, because a lot of them are frankly control freaks who are like, I want my product to be exactly right. I want to be able to deliver it when I promised it, and I want to be able to make it for what I thought I could cost wise.
And that doesn't sound like control freak at all to me. That's like, yes, that's absolutely what I'm going to require and expect. And, I think so. I mean, I have experience across both food and beverage. I
Yeah,
worked at a plant-based food company where, even I was a product manager on the mayo business for a while, but my more recent experience is all about beverage. To me, it seems like with beverage, you've got a better shot of having something that comes right out to the flavor and the feel of the product because I don't know. I mean, unless it's super complicated, like, a lot of the products can be water and
right.
then ingredients. And I don't know. I mean, it was pretty rare that it wouldn't be exactly what we expected it to be. Whereas with food, I mean, yeah, it's a process, right? Like you get a co-man and then you really need to go there and spend time with them. And the thing is not going to come out right at all at the beginning. And you got to have
Right.
your ops people there to help them figure out how to actually make it on their equipment. And, I think like things can get stuck in the pipes and just so many different things can happen. Right. So it makes sense to me that there could be a lot of risk, immediately jumping in with a co-man who maybe they're not going to care about you in the early days because you're small and you're going to be demanding, even though you are small, if they're even willing to work with you. And maybe they don't even have the right equipment for the thing that you're
Exactly.
trying to make the right way, right? And so you're basically like a very needy baby asking someone to take care of you without offering a lot in return, except the promise of bigger future business for a co-man, right?
Totally, totally. And we've had companies large and small come to AMP for exactly this reason. We've had refugees from co-mans who thought that they found the right one and they went out and a year and a few $100,000 of lost ingredients later, they're like, I kind of figured I had to do it myself. I was actually I was just thinking about this one client we had who that was their experience. They made there was a company called Keto Farms. They made delicious keto snacks available on Amazon and elsewhere. And they didn't have a great experience with their first co-man. They came to Amped. They had the realization that if they were going to succeed in a co-man, they're going to have to hire a quality manager who's going to have to sit on the line and watch everything that was happening. They were going to have to help the co-man with their supply chain and sourcing the right ingredients. And they realized that by the time they'd done all those things, they might as well do it themselves. They even had, like you said, they even had to buy the equipment that the co-man was going to use. And at that point, just have your own facility at Amped or someplace else. And what
Yeah.
was cool about it is they actually did eventually go out to a co-man again, but they did it on their terms. They did it on their timeline. And my favorite part of the story was they said that when they went shopping for co-mans, they actually brought a video with them of their entire process from start to finish. So there was absolutely no question about how the product was made. There was no question about what was involved. And it actually made their negotiations a lot smoother.
That's pretty interesting. And yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. Just yeah, reflecting back on the early days and the learnings and gosh, it's expensive when you do
Yeah.
like you have minimum runs that you have to do with co-man. And if it doesn't come out right, you got a lot of product that's not right. So not having that chance to kind of test and learn because you're just going from 0 to 100 pretty quickly once you're on those
Exactly.
lines. And then also when you're talking about the ingredients, I was just remembering the horrors of like having the ops manager order everything that we thought we needed and then having to check that they sent the thing that we actually ordered in the right quantity, which they didn't a lot of the time. And then like confirming it's at the warehouse. Oh, now they can't find it at the warehouse. And then confirming it got from the warehouse to the co-man. And oh God, like maybe some things didn't arrive and we're all panicking. And then like the worst is when you find out that, all of a sudden like the quantity is different the day before a co-man run that you've scheduled and are going to have to pay for. Which, okay, I could see there being some benefit and peace of mind to just like knowing all of those answers at once because you have the ingredients and you're planning the production. So I think that would have made the ops manager's life a lot less stressful.
Totally.
So cool. So, and do you notice like a type of founder that you think typically is more likely to choose a commercial kitchen off going right for a co-man, whether it's like the amount of funding that they have or the level of experience and, maybe confidence they have about doing that themselves? Or, what are the like top 5 things, if this is true about a founder, they're probably going to choose a commercial kitchen?
Yeah. So, I'd say it's probably less about the founder and more about the product. That if you've got a really conventional product that's all branding, like, I mean, the classic example being like, Liquid Death, it's water in an amazingly cool can. They could go anywhere. There's no advantage to them to self-manufacture. There are a million people out there that will can water for you. If you've got a very standard kind of protein bar or something like that, you can find somebody who's going to co-manufacture that, or a cookie. You can find somebody who's going to co-manufacture that. If you have any kind of specialized ingredients, if you've got any kind of functional elements to what you're doing, if you've got a new process, if you've got new packaging, those are the things that kind of drive people into self-manufacturing at that sub $5 million level. I mean, another great example of this is one of every time I mention one of our clients, I say they're one of my favorites, and it's actually true. But I don't want anybody to feel like they're not my favorite. But one of my favorite clients is Zab's Hot Sauce, and they're on the Startup CPG's Slack as well. They came to us because they had their recipe, they had their product, they had their concept, they had everything going for them. What they wanted was a bottle that was going to stand out on the shelves, a hot sauce bottle that didn't look like Tabasco or Tapatio. And it turns out that all the hot sauce co-mans in the world use either Tabasco or Tapatio style bottles. And so they really didn't have a choice but to bottle it themselves. I mean, they could buy the bottle they wanted, which is a very kind of old style Louisiana looking thing. It's great. When you see it on the shelves, you recognize it instantly, even before you read the label. And that was their motivation. And they probably will end up going to a co-man at some point as well. But again, it's going to be on their terms, not a volume where the deal really makes sense.
That's pretty interesting. And, we're in the middle of shelfies season right now for Startup CPG. And yeah, the amount of hot sauces coming in, I'm like, oh boy. All right. I don't know how you stand out on that shelf, but I think a custom bottle might be one good way to do it. And I know Zabs has done really well. So that's great to hear about them. So overall, let's just, for anybody who has not been to a commercial kitchen, which I had the pleasure of doing with your team recently, it was super fun. What is it that you can do there? If you're like, just getting your business going, what are all the facilities and offerings that a commercial kitchen would have?
Totally. So, well, maybe I could spend just a minute on the spectrum of commercial kitchens, because there are a whole bunch of them out there. There are a few basic types. There are hourly kitchens that you rent blocks of time at, and there's some really great ones in that space. There are places in LA that we love, like Crafted Kitchens and the Kitchen Terminal. Places in Chicago like Kitchen Chicago. And these are really solid places where if you want to try something out, you want to experiment, they're wonderful places to go. There are incubators, which provide business training, food safety training, things like that. Some of the originals were like La Cocina in San Francisco, Union Kitchen in DC, Commonwealth Kitchen in Boston. Again, really beloved places, deservedly so. That are places to learn and grow. The Hatchery in Chicago is maybe the biggest incubator kitchen out there, and it's awesome. I love that place. And then there are ghost kitchens that we all know about. These are buildings where you've got multiple individual kitchen suites. So it's a room with a door that closes. Some of the incubators have like big open spaces. Kitchen Town in San Mateo is an example of this. Again, another great place, big open space, lots of stations. The ghost kitchens are for food delivery more than they are for CPG, even though you will sometimes find a CPG company in a ghost kitchen. I actually don't believe ghost kitchens are that long for this world. There's just a whole other podcast we can do, but that's a thing. And then there are catering kitchens, which they look like ghost kitchens, but instead of being for exclusively for food delivery, you might find some food trucks, you might find some caterers. The catering kitchens tend to be extremely low service. So often there's nobody home. We kind of joke that they're the actual ghost kitchens because it's like it's you and the ghosts, and that's it. And then there are pilot facilities, R&D facilities. There were a couple. There's one great one called Pilot Works that was all over the country, then suddenly closed down and left a lot of brands kind of stranded. And I mentioned Kitchen Town in San Mateo is another great pilot and R&D facility. And that was a very long way around to saying what we are, what Amped is. Amped is a production-oriented commercial kitchen. We are one of the largest facilities out there. Most times you go to a commercial kitchen, you'll see there, 4 kitchens, 6 kitchens, something like that. Our buildings have between 50 and 60 plus kitchens in them. They range from as small as 150 square feet, the size of like a kitchen in a small house, all the way up to say 2,000 to 4,000 square feet, which would be like the kitchen in a relatively sizable hotel, or sometimes in the back of house at a food court. We have people doing everything in our building from pilot runs, testing. Applebee's was with us for a while doing recipe development, to pilot production. So this is where you're off the benchtop, as they say, and out of the test kitchen, and now you're producing stuff that you're actually going to sell, but it's still early and you want feedback from the marketplace. So Beyond Meat came to us to pilot the Beyond Burger for national sales. And so they were making every Beyond Burger for every Whole Foods in the country out of Amped kitchens. And then you've got people doing actual production. And again, this would be like a Zab's hot sauce that's cooking it up, bottling it, labeling it, boxing it, and shipping it out. And so you can really do anything in a commercial kitchen that you could do in any food manufacturing facility, depending on that particular building's facilities, services, and licensing.
So let's say, in the instance of, I don't know, a hot sauce or a protein bar or something, if you go to a co-man, probably they're going to have the equipment that you need if, maybe there's like, hey, we don't run this kind of product, but we can run this kind of product. Okay, like probably you have the stuff to do it. For your kind of facilities, is it often that you would have all that stuff that you need in one of your kitchens, or is a brand typically going to have to get some equipment to make the stuff that they need?
Yeah, what a great question, Daniel. And I should say that a co-man is either going to have the equipment or they're not. It's pretty common that you go to a co-man and maybe they've got 2 out of the 5 things you need, and either they're going to have to buy them or you're going to have to buy them, or you're going to rent them or whatever. Our kitchens are like unfurnished apartments, basically. They've got all of the stuff that the health department and the USDA and people like that care about. They've got the washable surfaces, they've got the hoods, they've got the various hand sinks and prep sinks, et cetera. They also have the gas coming out of the wall, the power coming out of the ceiling and the wall, and it's ready for your equipment, but it's a blank slate for you to put the stuff in that you need for your process. And so the reason we do it that way, because a lot of times people expect a kitchen to be fully equipped. But we've got everything from beef jerky makers who only need dehydrators, to pasta manufacturers who've got very specialized machines from Italy with, handmade dyes, we have a company that is doing boil in a bag seafood dinners that really just needs refrigeration. So it's a full range of things, and we work closely with all of our clients to help them outfit their room appropriately for their process.
Okay, so there must be certain kinds of products where it could make sense and others where even just the filling,
Yeah.
it's just going to be too manual. So if I think back on my days at Hampton Creek, later
Mm.
renamed at Just Egg, okay, so they had things like dressings and mayo and stuff. And so it's going through, I think it goes into the tank, everything gets mixed up. I don't know, maybe
Yeah.
it goes through some pipes, whatever. And then at some point, it's going from a filler into for them, it was a PET, 12 or
Yeah.
16 ounce kind of thing. And then it seals and okay, everything gets stacked up. Great.
Right.
How does that kind of stuff work in a commercial kitchen where okay, you made the batch of stuff and now you need to fill all of it? And I've heard you talk about hot sauce and some other stuff how do you do that in a kitchen on your own? Do they have equipment that they're buying then to do that?
Yeah, so different commercial kitchens have different facilities. Obviously, at Amped, we've got several things that support that. We've got the individual production spaces, which would have, you would outfit with all the stuff you need to make, say, your hot sauce. You would probably have to get a filler, and you would probably want the filler that works with, your bottle type, et cetera. And so that would go in your room. And then outside of your room, we have packing rooms. We have staging areas. We have dry, refrigerated, frozen storage areas. So basically, what you're doing is you're taking the product out of you're putting the product into a package in your production space. Then you're bringing it out into a packing room, quite likely, where you're going to be labeling it and boxing it. And then you'll be assembling pallets. And we have a team that actually does help with things like that, moving the pallets into a staging area. And then we also have a team that when the distributor comes to pick up your pallet, our people are all forklift certified. So they'll move it onto the truck for you. So you don't have to worry about that.
Okay, so that makes sense. So let's say with a hot sauce, okay, maybe they've put all this stuff into a big tank or mixer.
Yeah.
Sorry if I don't use the right terms, but there's all the product and it's good to go. And then they need to get it into the jar. So the process of getting it from the tank or mixer or whatever it's into the jars, probably there's some kind of machine that they have purchased, which
Correct.
then pipes it from all of the good stuff into the specific jars. So probably that's somewhat of a semi-manual process for them to then fill it, and then they're capping it somehow. And then they're taking all of that stuff, maybe on a cart or something, into your staging area, where then they're going to probably hand sticker it, or maybe you have a label kind of gun or something, and label those up, put them in trays, stack them on pallets, which your team can help with, and get those pallets or cases or whatever ready to be picked up.
You nailed it. That's exactly right. And our clients have a full range from completely manual process to somewhat automated. I mean, we've had people set up, sealers and labeling machines and all kinds of things. It's really a complete range. And one of the nice things about a facility like ours and like some of the other ones out there is you really can customize it to whatever makes sense for you. And for a lot of people, especially when they're early stage, having a highly manual process is a great way to stay in touch with your product. You can, it's sort of surprising, but hand applying a label to a bottle, you start to see half the bottles, they're not sticking or something.
Yeah.
And you start to develop an awareness of some really obvious things you could do to increase or, decrease the error rate and stuff like that.
That's pretty interesting. Okay, so I had the chance to tour your facility, and I saw a bunch of different kinds of products being made. I saw, I guess, kind of like a flour company making stuff into big flour bags. They had a big mixer in there. I saw one company. It looked like they were making kind of like ready to eat meals, or I mean, salads, like box salads, that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And they had a big room and they were just churning them out in there, right?
Yeah.
If you think of it reminded me of like Thistle or one of those,
Yeah.
kind of healthy delivery meal services. I know our friends from Must Love produce there,
Yeah.
which is was a frozen product, but I think they're transitioning that now into graham crackers, maybe.
Exactly.
Right, and then I saw a bakery also making some pretty delicious looking products. I think my stomach just grumbled a little bit thinking about some of the baked goods I saw in there,
Yeah.
and so a pretty broad variety. So let's say someone like that, or just any CPG brand is coming in. How do they even know what equipment that they're going to need, right? If you put yourself in the shoes of a very early founder and they're like, yeah, I want to make pasta or I want to make chips or protein bars. Like, yeah, how do they even know? Is that something that like your team is going to help them with, or they need to kind of have already hired a consultant to do all of that help, like figuring out what equipment they need?
Yeah, yeah. Also, an awesome question, and it's the full range. So, Beyond Meat, it was their process engineer that first contacted us, and she already knew Mary Inspector, awesome woman. She knew everything she needed. She almost came with her protractor and her pencil and was like ready to lay out the whole kitchen. And then on the other hand, we've got people with very simple products who know that they're just going to need a Hobart and that's it. And then in the middle are where most of our clients are. They have some idea of what they think they want, and usually they come to us and it starts a conversation because most everything that people bring in requires some kind of power or ventilation or plumbing or something. And so, we start talking with them, and what we usually will do, quite honestly, we've got a lot of expertise on our team just because we've been through this for over 10 years. We see what works and what doesn't work, but we very frequently will refer people to commercialization experts, people like Jamie Valenti Jordan, who I know is really active on the Slack here and is a huge help. He works with several of our clients. People like Mark Haas of Helmsman, who's also great. Or there's several others out there who we refer to, and often people will have a conversation with somebody like a Jamie or a Mark, and for free for 30 minutes get an incredible amount of advice as to what equipment they should have. And then quite often people will engage them to help them design the line. And not to be changing the subject away from commercial kitchens and instead, to commercialization experts, that is money so well spent. Because if you design an efficient equipment line, that can make all of the difference to your gross margin, which can make all of the difference to your ability to pay yourself, which can make all of the difference to your ability to attract investors down the road and actually, have a really good exit if that's what you're in the business for.
So speaking of margins, what
Yeah.
do you think is going to be the difference in margin or just cost per unit for somebody like a Zabs or something for making it with you, which obviously has a lot of benefits, especially in the early days, versus going out to a co-man? And obviously there's a lot to consider here, right? Of
Yes.
you probably aren't going to waste as much inventory because you didn't have to hit a minimum of stuff that you might not sell, especially in the early days when the volume forecast is so binary. Did we get Whole Foods, SoCal or not? Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, it depends. It depends hugely on the volume, as you say, and also on the nature of the product. So, one of my favorite examples of this was Fourth and Heart Ghee, which before they sold, the original founders of Fourth and Heart were with Amped, and they became America's second largest ghee company, operating out of I think a 350 square foot kitchen at Amped. And they were using all the additional resources. They were just in our packing rooms constantly. They were at our loading docks constantly, and they were just churning out that ghee, and it was amazing. And they went to a co-man, and their unit costs increased substantially. I don't want to give out specific numbers because it was somewhat confidential, but they increased substantially. And I remember asking them, so why are you guys doing this? And they said, well, we're at the point now where for us to grow and to be, go from a $5 million company to a 10 or $100 million company, we need that additional capacity. And also we're kind of tired of running a kitchen. And we kind of want to spend our time focusing on other things. And so that's really the thing. Your unit cost at Amped or at another commercial kitchen can be extremely efficient compared to a lot of co-mans. And then it's really just a question of, can you achieve the scale that you want at a place like Amped versus a co-man? And do you have the quality control at a place like Amped versus a co-man that you want?
Okay, so that makes sense. And yeah, the now CEO of Fourth and Hart, Max, is a pretty good friend of mine. Actually lived just down the hall from me here in my building in Marina Del Rey for a while, and then he ditched me to move to a cooler part of LA, according to him. But I know now they have their own manufacturing, which I don't know this from him. I'm just guessing was probably a result of that. Like, okay, we went to a co-man and gosh, that was expensive. Like, what are they doing over there? Maybe they don't have a fit for what we're trying to do. And so now I think they have their own manufacturing and are doing that pretty efficiently.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great to see, but also kind of, it's like, okay, let's go back to having our own kitchen, but times 10 or 50 or whatever it is.
Totally.
So, and then, okay, Must Love, for example, they were working with you, and that's a frozen product.
Correct.
What's it like then to be making a frozen product in a commercial kitchen versus shelf stable?
Yeah. So one of the big questions you should always be asking yourself, I'd say like the three big questions, aside from cost and all the sort of basics, that you should always ask yourself when looking at a commercial kitchen are, number one, do they have the facilities that I need to make my stuff? If I'm doing gluten-free, can they accommodate gluten-free? If I'm doing kosher, can they accommodate kosher, USDA, whatever? Secondly, can I get the license or certifications that I need in that spot? And a lot of people who are selling wholesale ultimately need to be able to get third party certified if they want to sell at a Target or a Walmart. So you want to find out if you can get the kind of licensing certifications that you need. And then finally, are there the services? Are there the people there that can help you with this? And so to answer your question about a frozen product, for a lot of frozen products require a dairy license in addition to the traditional wholesale license. And it's funny, California, this is a little bit of a sidebar. Back in the 60s, the dairy industry lobbied to make sure that if anybody is selling anything that might be confused with milk, they still need to get a dairy license, even if it's not milk. So people doing almond milks and oat milks and things like this all need dairy licenses, which is utterly absurd.
Nice pun. Utterly absurd. Nailed it.
Thank
All
you.
right. I heard the churning butter ghee one before too. Just calling both of those out. Points on the board. Let's keep going now.
Oh, thank you. And my kids would be rolling their eyes right now if they were in the room with me. So for a frozen product like Must Loves or some of the other frozen dessert makers that we have, it usually requires working together with us, and we will work with them to get their dairy approval as well as their wholesale approval. So there's the licensing component of it. Sometimes people need a temperature controlled room. And again, that's something that we can work with them on as well, providing custom HVAC so it maintains the temperature that they need. And usually, frankly, it's just getting the right machines in there. And as you're manufacturing the stuff, being able to move it into our frozen storage as soon as possible. And our buildings all have substantial amounts of frozen storage that keeps things below zero, -4, -5, which is important for the quality of frozen desserts.
Okay, so that makes sense. And then you mentioned certifications, and just to dig into that a bit then. So what certifications could someone go for working with you guys, for example, versus what might be difficult?
Yeah, so we pride ourselves in being one of the commercial kitchens that supports the full range of certifications. We have people who get their at one extreme, just your typical retail license, which means that you're allowed to legally sell at a farmer's market or direct to consumers. You can have a little mail order business. Wholesale is our biggest segment at Amped. So people who come to Amped manufacture goods that are sold by third-party markets, sold by restaurants, that sort of thing. Once you start getting into meat products, you need USDA, and we can accommodate that. There are a few commercial kitchens around the country that can accommodate it. It's often a function of what the local USDA office is willing to allow for. We even have people operating out of AMPT who have what's known as SQF, Safe Quality Food Certification, which is the highest international standard. It's a private standard. It's almost like you get a private health department come and inspect you. And when you've got SQF certification, that's usually what you need to sell at a place like Costco or some of the larger retailers out there.
And some of those first licenses you mentioned, like wholesale, retail, like, do you need those if you're a brand? Because I don't really know. I wasn't the ops guy, but at least for the beverage business, I don't know. We had the co-man and they just did what they were going to do. And I don't even know if maybe we had licenses that the ops team had gotten and I didn't know about it. But like, do you need some special licenses as a brand to just start selling, let's say, delivering it yourself, or selling it at a farmer's market in California, or fulfilling orders to Erewhon or something?
Yeah, 100% you do. And it's only getting stricter. Back in 2011, the federal government passed something called FSMA, or the Food Safety Modernization Act, which raised the bar on what's required. And in addition to co-manufacturers' ability to manufacture stuff, the number one thing that they provide usually is licensing. Like, it's up to the co-man to hold on to their retail, wholesale, USDA, whatever licenses they have. And it's such an alphabet soup of requirements that it can be quite daunting, especially if you're a new brand and you're not the ops person. Yeah.
And I remember, I think maybe 5-6 years ago, there was some cottage law that they passed in California that was like, it's okay for very small brands to produce limited quantities, like not in their bathtub, but like, at least in like a kitchen, some kitchen of some kind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you'd be surprised how many bathtubs are probably part of the process for certain things. But yeah, cottage food laws swept the country several years back, and they usually have a revenue limit. So like you say, you got to be under $50,000 a year or something like this in order to legally be manufacturing under cottage food. But what's important is a cottage food license is an actual retail food license. And health departments do inspect cottage food licensees. And it can often be kind of like hilarious, almost like this is Spinal Tap type experience of manufacturing food, in your laundry room, and having the inspector come and needing to show them where you wash your hands and how you keep it clean and lint free or whatever it is. And so there's some pretty comical situations that arise from cottage food. But it's honestly been a great it's been a great resource for a lot of people to get them started. And a lot of our clients actually had cottage food licenses and just got so popular that they went through the $50,000 revenue limit and needed a separate commercial kitchen.
We'll be right back. Imagine this. You get accepted into a new regional chain. Hooray! Now, the race to drive velocity begins, but awareness plays are so expensive. Demos, displays, coupon programs, the list goes on. But what if there was a way to connect with millennial women, some of the most important shoppers out there, to actually go into the store, buy your product, and then post about it to their trusted friends and neighbors? Well, now there is. Meet Hummingbirds, the new platform that connects your brands with real shoppers in a specific city. Hummingbirds lets you set up your campaign, match with the local birds who are interested, and then track the social impact of the campaign. It's such a cool concept to hear about a product from someone from my own community that I know and trust, rather than some big-time influencer who might not even be relevant in certain zip codes. To learn more, check out hummingbirds.com/startupcpg, and you can even register for a chance to win a free custom-managed program. The winner will be chosen on June 28th. Terms and conditions apply. Please visit the website for details. Good luck. And now, back to the show. Got it. Okay, cool. So just, for anyone who hasn't been to a commercial kitchen, if I can just walk you through what my experience was like. Okay, so I showed up in LA. It's a beautiful building, walk in. And so, walking around the floors, there are just many doors, like kind of nondescript doors. And those doors, if you open any one of them, are going to lead to the kitchen, which is that particular brand's space. And you said there are some smaller ones. There's some much bigger ones.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's a bigger cost for the bigger ones. So you want to choose the one that's right for you. Probably you can, graduate to bigger ones as you get bigger than
Yeah.
some of the other rooms. So like I saw trucks coming in and out of there, like a lot of them constantly, right? So there are deliveries coming in with ingredients. There are, pallets going out, fulfilling
Totally.
orders. And then we walked into a dry storage area, which is just had a couple racks in there, pretty big room. And so brands are storing their ingredients and maybe some finished product there as well. And then, as you mentioned, there was also a freezer. And I got some respect from you because I just walked right into the depths of it, trying to get that good, Instagram
You can always tell who's
content.
hardcore by whether they walk into our frozen storage and stand there. And that's what you did.
Well, not many know this. People know this about me, but I was a Domino's delivery boy back in the day. And so I used to have to go into that freezer and pull some stuff out of it. So I'm not afraid to go into a freezer. I'm just afraid of it closing behind me.
Totally.
So, Mott, I think I have a good understanding of the kind of stuff that can go wrong at a co-man, having worked with co-mans in beverage and food and, a lot of tough scenarios there that you might have to problem solve with their team or call in a consultant. What are those scenarios at a commercial kitchen? I'm sure a lot of your clients have had issues over the years. What's it most likely to be?
Yeah. So all the same stuff that happens in business happens whether you're at a co-man or you're at a commercial kitchen. You can have vendor payments that are slow, supply chain issues, all those normal things. The things that I'd say are specific to a commercial kitchen are staffing is probably the number one challenge people have, because you've got a big order coming in and suddenly you need to double your team size and they need to work all night long for 3 weeks to get it out. And the way people in our community often solve that is we've got a lot of great workers in the building, and our clients tend to know each other and say, hey, do you have anybody who wants to pick up extra hours? And so sometimes people can do that, but it still can be quite a challenge. I mean, we also have a partnership with Instawork, a temp agency that provides kitchen, food handler certified team members. So if you do have a big job, you can get temps. And so that's something that helps out as well.
Oh, cool. I've never heard of that. That's good to know about as a resource for the community, because people do ask, how do you hire people to staff your commercial kitchen spot in general? You're like, I don't know why it didn't even occur to me. I'm like, no, the team's in there. You're doing the thing. Like, oh no, of course you don't want to spend all your time actually doing that. You're going to hire some people. So where do they go to do that?
So it's a variety of it's a variety of sources. It's everything from just putting ads up on all the normal
Indeed.com.
Exactly. Indeed or Monster or whatever.
Craigslist.
There you go. Again, one of the benefits of being in a commercial kitchen community is it really is often a community, and the network is really good. And we've got people we've got clients who will actually tell everybody in the building, like, hey, I've got somebody who needs extra hours. Anybody need any extra help? And people get each other jobs constantly in our community. There are also places like some of the community colleges around have job training programs in culinary, and they can be a great resource. As I mentioned, Instawork is a great resource. We've got several clients that use them, and quite frequently, just people in the neighborhood are a great network. And hire one good person, it's often amazing how many good people they know and can bring with them.
And is it a community like, okay, Startup CPG, we have a Slack and everyone can talk to each other. Do you have some kind of a forum, or is it mainly you're seeing people in the halls and you have an email list, or where does the community live?
Yeah, it's both seeing people in the halls, and we've got little co-working spots in each of our buildings where people hang out. And it's funny, we've got people who have worked in the building for literally like 8-9 years for 5 or 6 different tenants that we've had, who've just sort of been around. And when you go to the office area, you'll see them typing away at a different computer every couple years. And it's kind of funny. So there is the in-person element, which I think is the best. Not to in any way, say something bad about online communities, which are amazing, but in person is still the best. And going to the co-working spot, it's amazing what you can learn. We also have our own sort of Slack-like thing that all of our clients belong to. And it is a great resource where somebody can post like, hey, I need an organic certification, but I'm really, really small and I can't find any organic agency that's willing to work with me. Very much like what happens on Startup CPG. Um,
Yeah.
Although I'll say your Slack is a lot more active than ours.
Okay, well that's good. I mean, it's great to have just people to reach out to, and man, I agree with you. In person is better than online. So it's sort of like, well, you can have one really high quality conversation with somebody in person, or kind of a low quality one with a lot of people. But each have
Totally.
their benefits depending on what you're looking for. But I agree, the more in person stuff, the better, because that's when the good stuff really happens. Um, so yeah, and then that was pretty cool to see. Also, at your facility, you did have office space where people could come and be on their laptops, and you had a conference room as well that I think people can rent out. So if they want to host, a buyer or investor or
Exactly.
whoever for a meeting, there is a space to do that. It doesn't all just go down inside of the kitchen.
Right.
Are there any other shared services? So I know, okay, you can store ingredients and obviously fulfill orders and stack pallets. I know your team helps out with that. Like, do you guys help on ingredient sourcing, or any other stuff that would be like ancillary services?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of informal help that happens. Again, like somebody saying, "Hey, I'm doing a big order from Uline, and I'm going to be ordering 50,000 boxes because the price is a lot better. Anybody want to go in with me?" And so we have things like that. Um, and again, our managers, our operations team, Sean Hennessy in Chicago, who's our head of operations, and Jason Sheps here in Los Angeles, who runs the region. They're both food guys and have decades of experience between them. And just being around so many early stage CPG companies, there's just a wealth of information that they have informally to advise people. And I'll say, people are often wondering, should I go to an incubator space or should I go to like Amped if I'm an early stage company? And I think for a lot of people, incubators are a great choice if you want all of the wraparound, business training and marketing resources and things like that. Um, and then if you're the sort of person that wants to really build your own network and your own team and plug into something bigger and sort of pick and choose, those are the people that usually will come to a place like Amped, um, because we don't require that you work with any particular resources. If you have your own commercialization consultant already, that's awesome, and we welcome that. But if you're going for USDA and you need help with your HACCP plan and you don't know who to call, we've got a list of like 5 people who will help you out. And it's just having been around for a long time, you develop that kind of informal network.
Got it. Okay. So probably a lot of people listening are wondering, like, oh, this sounds great. Like, how much does it cost? and a little afraid because,
Yeah.
every dollar counts for an early brand. Can you give us a ballpark? And I mean, I know, like, okay, you're in LA and Chicago. Probably the costs are going to be different, and those are both major markets. LA obviously
Yeah.
being one of the most expensive markets in the country.
Right.
But can you just give people a sense for, like, if you're this size, it might be this much. If you're this size, it could be at this level.
Totally. Well, so let me start by saying how we kind of think about the cost. And you can get it at a super entry level at Ampter or another commercial kitchen and kind of dip your toe in, get your license, start producing. And usually it starts to make sense to do that when you are producing at least 20 hours a week or something like that. If you're just going to be doing, 1 8-hour run, in the next 6 months, you should probably go to an hourly kitchen because that's going to be your best bet. But if you're doing about half-time production, you should be at a full-time kitchen. And our entry level starts at about, call it, 2,000 a month, give or take, and that's fairly standard in the industry. So once you've paid for everything, your licensing, your storage, your utilities, all that other stuff, you're probably going to be in for about $30,000 a year at the entry level. And the way we look at that is that that could be less than the overhead at a co-packer for a single run. And so you sort of buy yourself a year of production capacity, and you can come in and out and you can iterate and you can refine and you know that that's your home base. And so again, for about $30,000, that's what you get. Obviously, it goes up from there, and we have clients who've taken down massive amounts of space and are doing, as I said, like 50, $60 million worth of production, and so their facilities costs are going to be a bit more than that. But you can get your foot in the door for, call it about $24,000 to $30,000 a year.
Okay, so that would get you one of those smaller spaces that you talked about, like could be 200 square feet or 300 square feet. And then obviously the cost scales for the bigger kitchens as your business scales. And then can you kind of swap around like, hey, I want to get foot in the door. Like, oh no, we have a lot of orders. Now I need to move into one of your bigger spaces. Can I hop next door if it's available?
Totally. It happens all the time. I mean, we've had people who were in our smallest space paying, the tiniest amount of money selling at farmers markets, who got a call on Friday saying thrivemarket.com wants 10,000 units. And they have, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this on your podcast, but an oh shit moment. And
I also don't know the answer to that. So let's just go with yes. It's okay.
Okay, cool. Well, so they have their own shit moment that how am I going to do 10,000 units? And they call us up, and over the weekend, we move them to a space that's twice as big and get them set up, and they're selling to Thrive Market in 3 weeks.
That's very cool. Okay, and then conversely, let's say you're moving into a bigger space, then you have all this equipment, and then something beautiful happens, and all of a sudden you need to outgrow your commercial kitchen. And but you have that equipment now that you've purchased, and what are you going to end up doing with all of that stuff when you move to the co-man? Like, what's that process like?
Yeah, so it does happen that people end up with equipment that they need to unload. And the good news is there is usually an amazing market for used equipment, often within our building. And so some of the most frequent posts you see on our internal Slack-like system are people who have that happy thing where they're graduating to a co-man and they want to sell. Usually it's pretty common stuff that they're selling. It's like, I want to get rid of my Metro racks, or I want to, things that anybody can use, and they always find a home.
What would be the top couple pieces of equipment, like most common, somebody's going to need for different kinds of products? For somebody who knows nothing about equipment, like, what are the top couple ones you're going to see in commercial kitchen spaces?
I'm almost afraid to tell you it's such a boring answer, but it's prep tables and speed racks. Those are the things that everybody needs. Because no matter what you're doing, you're going to have a food safe stainless steel surface that's washable, where you can prepare stuff and stack stuff and that sort of thing. As far as what actually goes into the kitchen, it really depends on what you're making. And it could be anything from, a tilt kettle if you're doing, for example, ghee, and you want to boil off the water and get the dairy components at the top, to we've got a lot of people using dehydrators these days. And so you'll see those coming into the building, and you'll see people using kind of
what's a dehydrator?
A commercial dehydrator at the entry level. It kind of looks like a clothes dryer, except you put food in it, and it literally, it's exactly what it sounds like. It dehydrates the food. And so if you're making beef jerky, or if you're going to make certain kinds of preserved foods, it's really cool. And a lot of people now are starting to use them not just as a way of creating more shelf stable foods, but as a way of changing the texture and experience of the food. We've got a great company now doing dehydrated candy out of one of our facilities. So it's like they'll turn a gummy worm into something that looks and feels like a Cheeto in your mouth, but tastes utterly different. And it's awesome.
Oh, cool. I know freeze-dried candy is all the rage on TikTok. That's been pretty... my little niece had some, and I tried it, and it was actually fascinating.
Yeah, actually, I got to give these guys a shout out. They're called Kanpai Foods with a Z at the end, and they are just crushing it. And their flavors are so good and so exciting. My wife and I actually did a wine pairing with their full range of freeze dried candies the other night, and I highly recommend. There's one that they call Cosmic Crunch, which is sort of like nerd clusters that have been freeze dried. That plus a nice dry Italian wine, it'll blow your mind.
Wow. All right. I'm coming over to the Mott household for a wine pairing and freeze dried candy night. and a music jam also.
Oh
Maybe
yeah,
anybody who's just listening to the podcast can't see, but both Mott and I, and in our backgrounds, both have a bunch of musical instruments. Mott's got a couple axes there, some nice guitars. He's got his piano keyboard. I've got my trusty ukulele. I've got my cajon drum.
Your cajon. I see your cajon.
That's right. That's right. And probably anybody listening to the podcast has already heard my music without knowing it, because it is the intro music where we strip the vocals. We play you the nice instrumental lead in. But can you check it out? Why, yes, of course you can. If you just go to Spotify or, Apple Music and search for Super Fantastics, 2 words. It has a nice Mondrian like black background with some bright colors. But maybe check it out. I don't know. While you're making your product in your commercial kitchen, give you some tunes.
Actually, the connection between music and food is not a small one. And so many of the people at Amped are musicians. It's crazy. And when you walk through the facility, so you're describing the experience of coming in the door, you go to our locker room, you get your hairnet, you get your beard cover, maybe a smock, and then you walk out through the second door into the food safe area, to the hallway. And as you go down the hallway, you will hear just the most awesome tunes coming from people's spaces, because people are partying while they work. And it is a total vibe.
Yeah,
and
why not?
It's great. Yeah.
That's it. I actually thought a lot about the parallels with music and food. I mean, just for me, having recorded an album, actually the process was really helpful, especially when it came to working with a formulator. Because, when I worked with a producer or with, artists who were sitting in for my album, like you really learn how to tell them like, hey, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what I'm looking for you to be able to do. Can you do this to it? And it's just like that working with a formulator, which is really like a food artist. And if you can figure out how to decide what you like and really give them the feedback in ways that they can then understand and work on it, like they'll make it happen. They have the technical skill. A lot of times it's just making sure that, you communicate the vision to them and be specific.
Totally. Well, and it's also it's also a parallel if you've ever made an album, that like you've got a schedule and a budget that are driving the production of this thing, and you could spend the next 3 years trying to get your guitar tone exactly right, or you could say that's good enough and I want to get it out. And one of the big differences that I hear between co-mans and self-manufacturing facilities from our clients is that at a co-man, you usually, especially when you're a small scale company, you don't get to set the priorities for, when it's midnight and they have to get this run out and their machine is gumming up because of your formula, and they got somebody else coming in at 8:00 the next morning. They're going to make the decision about how to deal with that. Maybe they're going to change the formulation a little bit so it stops gumming up, and you might or might not be happy with the result. If it's your kitchen, you get to decide, well, I'm going to go an extra day and I'm going to deal with the gumming, or I'm going to change the formula, but I'm going to make sure that I'm happy with the food experience at the end of the day. And so it is closely related to making an album.
I'm just like, if that's true, then I personally should probably not try to make a product in a commercial kitchen because of my album, where I basically redid it, like almost the whole thing 3 times, because it was my first album ever, which means like, okay, it's a little all over the place. Like the music style is very eclectic because I didn't have, one style. I had a lot of different songs.
Sure.
And then I was just growing as a musician, and I went in and I laid down all the vocals. And then I had one friend give me some very good feedback. He's like, I was like, oh shit, I need to redo all the vocals, which I mean, my for an album, like, I don't have a lot of listeners to it or anything, but my goal was just, it's an art project and I want to always like it. Cause I know a lot of musicians who they don't even, if you're like, hey, play me some of your stuff, they're like, no, I don't listen to it. I don't want to hear it when you're in the car. Like, I don't like it or it's embarrassing. I just didn't want that. I wanted to always like it and always like sharing it with people. And so I worked on it until it got to that place, and I redid whatever I needed to redo. And I got session musicians to add stuff if there was a hole in the music. And then that actually I was in San Francisco during the pandemic and had kind of almost finished at the beginning of it, and then basically spent a whole nother year, which kept me in SF. When everyone was in like Mexico or Miami having a good time, I stayed in SF because I was still going into the studio, which was very empty those days. So you could get a pretty good deal to go in and redo stuff, until it was just like, let's say 99% of what I thought it could be. And then I learned to live with that final 1%, although that still bugs me and I hear it. But the producer was like, it's time, like, let it go. so
I totally get it.
Okay. So maybe I then am the control freak or perfectionist, who'd be like, it's not ready. Like, let's just, I would never get it out to market if I was making it myself. Whereas if somebody else just made it for me, I'd be like, it's fine. Like,
well, actually, I mean, this is honestly one of the reasons we do recommend that people work with commercialization consultants, because they will keep you honest and they will make sure that you don't get trapped in that, perfection enemy of the good situation.
Yes, it was very helpful in definitely some instances where the producer could be like, nobody is going to hear that. It's just you, because you're so in the weeds on that. It's time to move on. Like, okay, yes, you're right. Thank you.
Totally.
So the help can be very valuable. So Mott, just before we wrap up, what's coming down the pipe for Amped Kitchen? And by the way, now that we're talking about music a bunch, I understand why it's called Amped.
Bam. Yeah. Well, so we are excited to keep growing. Especially as the world shifts away from, I think, ghost kitchens as a thing, there is a lot of opportunity for people like us to expand. We see every region needs something like this. Every region needs a place where food entrepreneurs can make stuff that is fresh. One of the trends that we've seen lately is very clean label products. And when you're doing stuff without preservatives, it really helps to be regional. So you're not shipping things halfway across the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so all the major population centers need something like this, and the demand has been really strong. And we've seen so many communities around the country, places like San Francisco, New York, Seattle, just really exciting CPG communities. And you can see them on your Slack. You can see the activity in the location channels. We're excited to start bringing our product to places like this, and a lot of them have some kind of commercial kitchens already, but they usually don't have something like us that's targeting scaling companies. And so we're just excited to get out there and meet more people in this business.
All right. So scaling into some new cities, sounds like to be announced. That's very cool to hear, because yes, we always hear people in the Slack channel asking about commercial kitchens in the various cities. And so far in LA and Chicago, they'll know to check you guys out. And just last question on that ghost kitchens part, what is your thesis around why those are going to go away? And I don't know a lot about them, except I know that when I order off Uber, some of Uber Eats or whatever, some of them are real restaurants that I can see here on the west side of LA, and some I either don't know where the restaurant is or it doesn't exist and it's coming from a ghost kitchen. But why do you think that those are going to go away or greatly reduce?
Yeah, so this could be also a whole additional podcast that I would love to do. The thing about ghost kitchens is the original thesis that Travis Kalanick from Uber had when he started Cloud Kitchens was that there's all this crappy real estate that's just sort of sitting there underperforming all over. And if we turn that crappy real estate into kitchens, then through the magic of apps and gig workers, we can connect it to these high value consumers who will, buy up a storm and suddenly have high value real estate. The way it actually has come out is that first of all, in order for a ghost kitchen to be successful, it has to be in a location where you can deliver food within like 10 to 15 minutes to the customers, a high volume of customers. And it turns out that if you can do that, it's not crappy real estate. It's actually really good real estate. And even during the peak of the pandemic, delivery only reached about 30% of total restaurant revenues nationally, if you could imagine. Still 70% was drive through, grab and go, stuff like that, even dine in. And so if you think about it in really big terms, if you're in a good location and your business is ghost kitchen and you're only selling to that 30% channel, you're leaving that 70% channel on the table, which is crazy. It's also tough because ghost kitchens are a business that's entirely predicated on companies like DoorDash or Uber Eats being willing to lose like 80 cents an order on every meal. And it's like, I don't know if I'd make a real estate bet that requires the main channel to my customers to be losing money in order to stay around. And so they just haven't performed. And what we've seen is cloud kitchens is having a lot of trouble. They're operating at like a 50% vacancy and had to restructure their debt. Kitchen United, which was one of the good companies that was out there, they were good guys, but they still basically folded up their kitchen operations. There's a lot of consolidation going on right now in the industry, and I think some locations and some operators will continue to thrive. And then you're going to see new concepts that are going to come out to replace ghost kitchens. I think delivery optimized food halls are the future. And there's a place called Revolving Kitchens in Dallas, operated by a really good guy named Tyler Shin. They're high quality. They've got it down, and I think you're going to see more places like that coming out.
That's pretty interesting to me. That's exactly where my mind was going as well. As like, man, when I go into Uber Eats, like, I don't know, all of the different names of the restaurants there are they're just like different themes to me because I don't know most of the restaurants.
Right.
And it all honestly gets kind of tiring to like look through all of them if you're in a pattern where you're ordering a lot. Yeah. I would almost rather pick something that's just bigger and has more options. That's just one place. And I don't necessarily even care if it's like a specific restaurant. I care more about the ratings on the food from people like me. And speaking of food halls, that was always my dream. Like when I used to live in New York, I always wished that there was a like college style food hall where I could just have a meal plan and go in there and just have, just like I had in college. I don't know if, maybe you and I can start that as our next business.
Right? I mean, you got Italy, you got Chelsea Market, you got places like that.
Yeah, with a meal plan.
You don't have the meal plan. That's brilliant.
Yeah, I want a meal plan.
Great idea.
And it would be very social too, right? Because, I mean, pretty much everybody enjoys eating around people. Like, I loved those days in college where it's like, oh, mealtime, and you go, even if you're sitting by yourself, you're kind of around people. You might see people you know. There are obviously some challenges, like the meals that you don't use up are going to burn because you're paying for it, at least in college, probably like for a lot of people. Anyways, maybe your parents are paying for it. You wouldn't worry about it as much. Those costs will be very significant. Like, the meals they're not going to be cheap, but what's expensive is ordering Uber every meal because then you have the charges. Like, I mean, I've gone now, fortunately, I'm in a better place where I'm not just ordering in every meal. But it's
okay if you are, Daniel. It's okay.
I mean, it's hard to do anything to order a meal for under $30-$40, right? So definitely if you can do something that's like $20 even, that might feel expensive, but that's actually a lot cheaper than what you're really doing. So I personally would like that. I'm putting that out into the universe. Somebody please start a food hall, but it has to be near me. So I think New York also is a really good market for it because I think everybody would feel that way. It's like, no, it needs to be within, 3-4 blocks, but then I'll eat, most of my meals there, especially now that we're working from home. You might be a pretty good option. Go and get, I want some like good salad options, grab a little bit of whatever. And then I actually also don't feel like I need to be able to just choose whatever, because in college, you just ate the thing that was the meal that day. Right. Maybe there were 3 or 4 options and you picked one and it was always fine. Right. So I feel
like there's a carb,
Yeah. It's like, what's that like the paradox of choice or so? I don't know what the right word is, but it's like you can get kind of frozen by all of the different options that are out there. Whereas if someone just gave you a choice of 3 things, you'd be like, well, I'll have that then. So I feel like a food hall would make my life a little bit simpler. I wouldn't have to make so many decisions.
I honestly think that is a great idea.
Thank you. I have a bunch more if anyone wants to hear them of things that I hope someone else does to improve my life. All right. So, Mott, on that brilliant little brainstorm we just did, I'm going to wrap us up here. But just so for anybody who's interested to learn more about you and Amped Kitchens, what are good ways for them to follow along?
Yeah, well, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm Mott Smith. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to send us an email at leasing@ampedkitchens, AMPED kitchens.com. You could hit us up on Instagram. We're on, in fact, tag me on Startup CPG. Send me a DM on Startup CPG. We're all on there. We love it.
And then you guys probably have an office line somebody could just pick up an old-fashioned cell phone and give a call on.
Totally. Our general phone number is 872-240-8731. 872-240-8731. A live person should pick up that phone if you're calling during normal business hours and direct you to the right spot.
Okay, and that would be using the phone app on your phone. And if you all still use that. And I guess just, maybe one more last question, which is, let's say you're not in one of the cities that Amped is in, or just generally, like how do you find a good commercial kitchen? Probably a lot of people are wondering that.
Yeah, and even if you are in a city that Amp's in, I mean, there's so many good providers out there that you should explore. One of the best resources is thekitchendoor.com. It's a listing service, and you can find both kind of one-off kitchens, like some restaurant that's leasing itself out, or you can see the real formal commercial kitchens like the Amps and even some of the hourly places that are on there. I definitely recommend checking out, you call your local health department too, because quite often they'll be able to tell you who the licensed facilities are. And that way, you're going into a quality space. And then also, on the Slack, I'm sure if there's a brand you like and you know that they're self-manufacturing, this is sort of the obvious answer, but ask your network, because people will tell you what's good and what's not.
Very good advice. Yes, always feel free to ask that in the Startup CPG Slack, maybe in one of the community channels like Los Angeles or Chicago or Miami. And usually people jump right in with some recommendations. Mott, thank you very much. We really appreciate you being one of our Startup CPG supporters. You can always find him on the operations channel and follow up with him on LinkedIn as well. See some cool content, ask some questions about commercial kitchens, and maybe join us for an upcoming to be scheduled music jam here in LA. Let's do it. We'll play only food related songs.
I mean, we really should do this.
I'm in. We'll make it happen. All right. Thank you, Mott.
Hey, thank you, Daniel. Hey, and thank you to the whole Startup CPG community for what you guys are doing. I mean, this building these networks is where it's at, and what you guys are doing is awesome.
Thank you. We have a great team that loves to do it. All right.
Talk to you soon.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed the podcast today, it would really help us out if you can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I am Daniel Scharff. I'm the host and founder of Startup CPG. Please feel free to reach out or add me on LinkedIn. If you're a potential sponsor that would like to appear on the podcast, please email partnerships@startupcpg.com. And reminder to all of you out there, we would love to have you join the community. You can sign up at our website, startupcpg.com, to learn about our webinars, events, and Slack channel. If you enjoyed today's music, you can check out my band. It's the Super Fantastics on Spotify Music. On behalf of the entire Startup CPG team, thank you so much for listening and your support. See you next time.